what it actually looks like when we get ready to flee to the wilderness, what our mindset needs to be. And Brother Jim, I really feel like for most of us, there needs to be a little bit of a paradigm shift in our thinking about that time frame and what we need to take with us. And so I don't want to take too much time by way of introduction. Most folks know who you are and know who we are, those who are here. So I just want to turn the time over to you.
I really like this promise. The Holy Spirit will come and teach us all things. And I found that to be true, very, very true in my life. It's not just spiritual things, not just biblical things.
Mhm.
It's literally all things that the Holy Spirit will teach us.
Amen.
And then he'll help remind us of stuff we maybe have forgotten from time to time too. That's anyway. So I just want to pray here at the beginning and claim this promise. Father, thank you that you haven't left us to our own understanding, that you promised to send your Holy Spirit to come and teach us all things. And so may we each in our own way open our hearts wide to him and be willing to set aside anything that might be standing in the way so that he can teach us, and rather than just us throwing ideas around amongst ourselves. And we thank you and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Um, just put my face back up there for a minute. We'll look at another verse in here in a minute. Um, just for the rest of you, I was given a list of questions, actually two lists of questions that they wanted me to address for this particular presentation. And as I was going over the list, I actually went over them several times and really appreciate the lists, by the way, ladies, those of you who send them to me. But as I was going through them, I realized, a lot of these questions I could answer, just within a couple words, maybe a sentence or two or less. Some of them only one word I could answer it. But again, as I was going through it and thinking about that, I realized, there's really a deeper issue here. And if I just went through and answered all those questions quick and easy, fine, but I haven't addressed the real issue. So I want to stop just a bit at the beginning here and look back at that. Um, there's also kind of a major disconnect here that it kind of came to the surface too as I was thinking about this. And I think the best way I know how to illustrate that is um, I've led a lot of just Sabbath afternoon hikes or day hikes, just over the years. And also we've taken a lot of people on their first overnight wilderness trip as well as subsequent wilderness trips. But very early on, we noticed something that on like a Sabbath afternoon hike, typically people don't bring anything. I did kind of an informal survey about that, and I think I shared that in one of the other presentations, so I'm not going to get into that now. But I mean, like most people on a typical Sabbath afternoon hike, they don't bring anything. Um, not even a water bottle on a hot summer afternoon. And yet, on their first overnight trip, so like if they think they're going overnight, they know they're going overnight, then they want to bring everything. And they still don't bring the stuff that they really do need. They still have a pack full of a bunch of stuff that they thought they'd need, and they still miss the mark. I'm thinking about that, that contrast. It really blows me away in a way. I mean, I've had plenty of years to think about it, and I think I understand why. But there's just a major disconnect there in my thinking. And if we are going to be prepared for when we actually flee to the wilderness in the end times, that picture has to change. So I want to kind of address that. The other big piece of this, put the next slide up, please.
Um, that I
Nope.
don't,
Did we miss that?
yeah, that
It
wasn't
might
in
be
the
here.
one.
No, because it's short.
Oh, well, then just take it off and I'll just quote it for you.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Nahum 1 verse 9 is a real interesting verse.
So not rise up.
Yeah, just take the, yeah, stop sharing there for a minute. It basically says, what do you conspire against the Lord? He's going to make an utter end of this sin problem that what he's talking about. That affliction will not rise up the second time. And from that verse, and many others, obviously, too, but that's kind of the key one in my thinking on this, is God's in it for the long haul. All right. He's thinking about the rest of eternity already before all this started. He's been thinking about the rest of eternity. And after this experiment that some of his creatures have gone through here with sin, and from the prophecies, we know that that whole thing is winding down and getting really close to the end. We're living in very unique times that way here as far as Earth's history is concerned. But after it's all over, okay, there's going to be no more sin at all, okay, in any shape or form, affliction and all the troubles that it causes for the rest of eternity.
Amen.
And I understand that, like, that tells us a lot of different things. And the one I want to focus on is we see so much about how God is interested in our character and character development. And this explains to me why, because what our character is, I mean, that's who we are, the sum total of all our habits. And that's who we're going to be. Are we going to be safe to bring into that eternally secure kingdom that he has planned? And so we need to show that by developing our character, working with the Holy Spirit as he works through us to develop a character that would be safe to bring into that, rather than us running the risk of starting it all up over again. And so, just putting that kind of in plain language, God's in it for the long haul. He's not just, and that, anyway, several implications there. And so he's kind of trained me to look at things that way. And I think, that's what he's working on all of us people with, to look at things that way. And therefore, I have to share a couple of experiences I've had here. We've gone back to places where we've done presentations in the past. And this has happened several times. Somebody will come up to us during one of the breaks and says, "Oh, I want to show you my pack and see what you think of it." And so we tell them, "Yeah, okay." And then they'll bring their pack in, and we'll find a place where there's a table and they can lay their stuff out, and they start pulling all this stuff out of their pack, survival kit pack or grab and go bag. I'm not sure what they're thinking is there necessarily. I've seen it both ways. And they start pulling this stuff out, and we find stuff that they're pulling out, it's still in the original packaging. And when that happens, I'm cringing inside. I try to smile and be nice because I'm glad they at least got the pack together. But at the same time, the fact that it's still in the original packaging means they haven't even taken it out and done anything with it. And do they even know how this thing works? And they take it to the wilderness. And so here you got this trash that you have to deal with now. And so again, that's kind of what that same disconnect, okay, that I'm talking about here. And so, yeah, we could go through the list and I could tell you the exact items to get and put in it. But if you don't take it out and do anything with it, really, so what? Are you better off? Yeah, I think you'll be better off than the person who takes a bunch of stuff that they really don't need, because at least you'll have what you need, but you still don't have any experience with that. You haven't developed any skills and so on. And so you're still not where you really need to be. And so I'm just going to say this here. I'm not telling you what I'm going to tell you today so that you can put a kit together and let it collect dust in your closet. Okay. I'm putting it telling you this stuff so that you can actually go out and play with this stuff, learn how to use it, learn what it's for, develop some skills, and also some wilderness, firsthand wilderness knowledge as a result. And I'm saying that because in the questions, okay, I saw, behind the question a little bit that people's thinking, okay, what do I need so I can put it in my pack, and then they feel like they've got it covered. No. Okay, if you haven't learned how to make it work, if you haven't developed some skills, so what? Um, I'm going to share a saying here again in a bit, but the idea is you can't play a violin unless you have a violin to play. And I came up with that violin thing based on the Master's Touch poem, anyway, about some guy with a violin. Um, but it's like if you don't have a violin, you can't play it. Okay. And so you have to have this equipment, right? But the equipment can't just sit like a violin. Okay, I want to say I really want to learn how to play a violin, and I get a violin. I got to get a good violin, maybe, but it just sits there. It's like, so what? I haven't put in the time to practice, to develop some skill with it, to actually make it work and sound good. Okay, and work good. And so this is, unfortunately, I think this has been a disconnect in a lot of our people's thinking. And we need to go that second step and not just put a survival kit together and stick it in the closet and let it collect dust. And feel that we're prepared, because we're really not if that's all we're doing. I've been reading through Steps to Christ for my personal devotions here lately. And a couple days ago, with all of these thoughts going through my head too, I read chapter 7. I think I'm on chapter 10 now or something like that. But anyway, in chapter 10 on Steps to Christ, and I really want to recommend all of you go read this chapter. It's called The Test of Discipleship. I understand why it's called that, but it really addresses a much deeper issue in my thinking here. Anyway, in this chapter, it points out that there are two errors that we especially need to guard against. And this chapter is really about those two errors. The first one is like trusting in our own wisdom and in our own preparations. I'm kind of, applying that principle here to what we're talking about here. Well, here is first is trusting in anything that we can do to bring ourselves into harmony with God. Okay, there's nothing we can do to do that. The second error is that our works have nothing to do with redemption. Okay, that's a quote. And so there's these two errors, and as I've been thinking about it, these same two errors are in many different things in life, and also in end time preparation. And when it comes to end time preparation, just to put this in a little different wording here, the first one would be trusting to our own wisdom and preparation. Okay. And then the second one would be the belief that trusting wholly in God means that we shouldn't do anything. If I do anything, any little bit, then it's not wholly God's doing. That's the way our human reasoning. But that's not the way it works. Okay. And so any discussion that we have here about end time preparation really revolves about a quotation in early writings, page 56. And so if you can put that one up, that was the next slide that came up a little bit ago. So there we go. Okay, so as we read this, I'm going to emphasize certain phrases here, because a lot of people have interpreted this quotation, what it's saying here in this quotation, to mean that we shouldn't do anything because we need to be wholly trusting in God. Okay. And just notice some here, but I'm going to look at the other side of it in this quote here in a minute. It says, the Lord has shown us repeatedly that it's contrary to the Bible to make any provisions for our temporal wants in the time of trouble. I've had people throw that at me and tell me, Jim, you're all wrong. You shouldn't be teaching all this end time preparation, because it very clearly says here that it's contrary to the Bible to make any provisions, okay, for our temporal wants in the time of trouble. Let me just read on here. I saw that if the saints had food laid up by them or in the field in the time of trouble, when sword, famine, and pestilence are in the land, it would be taken from them by violent hands, and strangers would reap their fields. Then will be the time for us to trust wholly in God, and he will sustain us. I saw that our bread and water will be sure at that time. We shall not lack or suffer hunger, for God is able to spread a table in the wilderness. If necessary, he would send ravens to feed us, as he did to feed Elijah, or rain manna from heaven, as he did for the Israelites. And then this next sentence here is actually the following paragraph. It says, houses and lands are of no use to the saints in the time of trouble, for they will then have to flee before infuriated mobs, and at time their possessions cannot be disposed of to advance the cause of present truth. So notice the phrases here, okay? It's contrary to the Bible to make any provisions for our temporal wants in the time of trouble. Then will be the time for us to trust wholly in God. Our bread and water will be sure at that time. God will send ravens to feed us, as he did to feed Elijah, or rain manna from heaven. Notice that you underline the words necessary, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so based on these statements, many believe we're not to do anything. Okay, we need to trust wholly in God at that time, and our bread and water will be sure. Anyway, and so on. This thinking has led to a couple questions that I've heard recently. The first one being, when does our bread and water will be sure start? And we'll address that in just a minute. The second question is, God has promised that our bread and water will be sure. So why do we need to learn skills? Now, the answer to all this is, number one, it's never safe to build our whole case around one quote, okay, or one sentence. We need to look at scriptural as a whole and compare scripture with scripture. And we did a bit of that in the other presentations that we did. So I'm not going to get into all that now. Except let's look at the fourth sentence here. I think the fourth sentence is the key to what we need to worry about, like this time around. And it's right in the very middle of everything there. It says, it's right after, then will be the time for us to trust wholly in God, and he will sustain us. Okay, here's the key sentence there. It says, I saw that our bread and water will be sure at that time, and that we shall not lack or suffer hunger, for God is able to spread a table for us in the wilderness. And I want to focus on that word for, right after the semicolon. I've overlooked this for years, and just recently, okay, that's the whole answer right there, that one word. And let me read it again. And what word could we use instead of for? All right, what does the word for mean in this particular, we use the word for in a lot of different ways. What does the word for mean?
Because.
Yeah, it means because, yeah. So let me put because in there. So I saw that our bread and water will be sure at that time, and we shall not lack or suffer hunger, because why? God is able to spread a table for us in the wilderness. We need to focus on that table in the wilderness, okay? God is able to spread a table in the wilderness, and that's why our bread and water will be sure, not because the angels come and hand us stuff. And so let's look at, I think it's the next slide. Let's see what we got there. We're gonna have to skip down a couple. Here we go. Okay, so, all right. This table in the wilderness idea comes from Psalm 78:19. It's a question that the children of Israel asked during their wilderness wanderings. And that first quote there says, they spoke against God, saying, can God spread a table in the wilderness? Well, based on the quote we just read, yes, he can. Okay. And the second quote here, well, okay, that's just repeating that same sentence that we read earlier. Okay, so the last quote is from Ministry of Healing. That's what I want to focus on here right now. It says, the mountains and hills are changing. The earth is waxing old like a garment. But the blessings of God, which spread for his people a table in the wilderness, and those last three words are key. It says, will never cease. Okay, so this answers the question, when will our bread and water be sure? Well, they never quit. Okay, they've been there since the beginning. They've never quit, never ceased. And so God's blessings, which spread a table in the wilderness, I'm going to refer to those as God's wilderness blessings or just his table in the wilderness. That's going to be a kind of a key phrase for the rest of the presentation here. And it says that, that will never cease. So they're up there right now. They're out there right now. Okay. We can go out and experience them right now. It's not something special that happens only in the end times and so on. Um, the other issue here with the typical interpretation of the early writings 56 quotation is people don't understand how God works. And that goes back to the two errors that Steps to Christ talk about. And we need to understand how God and his angels work. And let's go up a couple quotes. I think it's like 1, 2, 3, about 3 or 4 of them up. The Isaiah 55, 8, and 9 is the one I want. There it is. This is, I think we need to emphasize this quote, this verse here way more than we do. God speaking here, he says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Just the way God does things is vastly different than the way we do things or than we even think about things. And so we really need to search scripture to find out how God thinks about things, how God feels about things, and how God does things. And if we're not careful, we'll jump to conclusions that won't necessarily be right. And we'll slip into these two errors here of trusting in stuff that we can do or not doing anything because we feel we're supposed to trust God that way. Okay, this is a key quote. And we looked at it in one of the other presentations, I'm pretty sure, so I'm not going to belabor the point here. But notice what, I'm going to start reading here. It says, in his Sermon on the Mount, okay, remember the Sermon on the Mount? Real good teaching there, real basic stuff. Christ taught his disciples precious lessons. Okay, these aren't just lessons, these are precious lessons in regard to the necessity of trusting in God. Okay, this is the same thing. The early writings quotation, the need to trust wholly in God. This is about that too. These lessons were designed to encourage the children of God through all ages. That includes us. And they've come down to our time. Okay, just in case we missed it first time, this is for our time, especially in the end times here, full of instruction and comfort. Okay, so these are something we really need to pay attention to here. The Savior pointed his followers to the birds of the air as they warbled their carols of praise, unencumbered with thoughts of care. For they sow not, neither do they reap, and yet the great Father provides for their needs. The Savior asks, are you not much better than they? Okay, the idea here is God provided for the birds. He's for sure going to take care of us. The great provider for man and beasts opens his hands and supplies all his creatures. The birds of the air are not beneath his notice. But notice the next sentence here. He does not drop the food into their bills. Okay, but he makes provision for their needs. And so same thing with us. God isn't going to drop the food in our mouths or drop it in our laps, but he's going to make provision for our needs. Well, what's that provision? Well, it's that table in the wilderness that we've been talking about. Okay, and then how do we access that? The table in the wilderness. And the last couple sentences here tell us the birds, they must gather the grains he has scattered for them. They must prepare the materials for their little nests. They must feed their young. Okay, so just like the birds have their part to do, we have our part to do. We need to gather the grains he has scattered for us in his table in the wilderness. Okay, the angels aren't going to just come and hand it to us necessarily. I mean, we have the promise that if that has to happen, then it will. But that doesn't seem to be like the default position here. The table in the wilderness is the default position. And this is something that we need to know how to get what we need from it. We need to, go and gather things and then prepare them or build them or make them. Why do we need to learn the skills? Well, we need to learn identification skills so that we know how to gather what we need to gather. And we need skills of how to prepare it and how to make it, how to put it together. And very quickly, when we start doing that, we're going to realize the need for some equipment, which is the main topic for today, again. this is really a cultural issue with us. There's so many switches and buttons and knobs in our lives that we're not used to needing any skills or any equipment to get to basically anything that we need. All we gotta do is push the button or turn the knob, and out comes water from the faucet, punch buttons on the microwave, and food's ready to go, and so on. And so we're not, culturally, we're at a disadvantage here. And I think Satan has arranged a lot of that. And he's definitely working with all of that to mess with our thinking and our values. So I want to just kind of share a lesson from nature here. Can we all picture a bear? Okay. What does the bear have that enables him to go out into the wilderness and survive very well? Okay, he has things like sharp teeth and sharp claws, uh, a fur coat, good nose and stuff like that. I'm going to focus on the claws maybe and the fur coat. Um, what do we have that animals don't have? Okay, intelligence. But have we ever said, I'd forget my head if it wasn't attached? You see, God knew that animals with even less intelligence would for sure forget the things that they needed. So he attached it to them as body parts. And so God has given us intelligence instead of claws and fur coat. And we should be wise enough to recognize what we need. That's one of Laodicea's problems, by the way. They don't recognize what we need. And bring the things that we need to accomplish what we need to accomplish. Just kind of as a side note here, just think about Elijah, all different stories about Elijah. And many of his stories, his mantle figures into the story. And I don't think we realize what that really is. It's basically a blanket. And it was like his cloak that he was using for a blanket. There's an interesting verse in Exodus 22, 26, 27 that talks about this. It's kind of the way most people dressed back then. They wore like a tunic and then this blanket, or mantle, or cloak, it's called sometimes. And looking at the stories about Elijah and his mantle, we realize his mantle, his blanket, to put it on, was part of his, okay, like what he had it with him all the time. And so, if something came up, he had it there, right there to use. And most of us aren't packing a blanket with us every day, but Elijah was. And so, anyway, that just steers into something, and that was this, one of the main items in our pack is blanket, okay, some kind of bedding. There's a couple of studies I shared with Dana and Kaylin and Davina earlier, and I'd like to make them available to you. If you send me an email, I'll put my email address into the chat here.
It's up on the screen, Brother Jim.
Oh, you got it there. Okay, so that'll save all of that. Fine. So anyway, there's my email address. Shoot me an email address, ask me for the studies, and I'll send them to you. The first one is about God's table in the wilderness, kind of a little more in depth about what we've just been talking about. And the second one is based on Great Controversy, page 626, is what we're going to look at next. And I'm just going to blast through the main points of the study here, rather than taking time to get into each one. And so, yeah, there you go. Real good. All right. So this is like a key quote for those of us thinking about fleeing to the wilderness in the end times, because this quote tells us a lot, and that's what that study's about. It says, as the decree issued by the various rulers of Christendom against commandment keepers shall withdraw the protection of government and abandon them to those who desire their destruction. Okay, that's what we typically call the death decree, but this tells us a bit about the death decree. When that happens, the people of God will flee from the cities and villages and associate together in companies dwelling in the most desolate and solitary places. Many will find refuge in the strongholds of the mountains. Okay, just, yeah, leave that quote up for the next bit here. Just want you to notice a few things here real quickly. This happens if you look at the chapter in Great Controversy about, which I think is actually the same chapter that this quote's in, about the plagues. We find that this death decree happens in connection with the third plague. In other words, this is after probation closes, and so there's no point in sticking around for evangelism. I get that comment every once in a while. So it's also notice where we're going, to the most desolate and solitary places. Okay, let that phrase just sink in. Run through your head, the most desolate and solitary places. We're not just going out in the woods a little bit. We're trying to get to the wildest and most remote area we can get to, as far away as possible. Okay. It says we will flee. All right. That means we're going to have to travel light. And so we can move fast. In other words, no heavy packs. Talk more about that later. Early writings 56, like the next paragraph down from where we read there earlier, talks about possibly fleeing from angry mobs. And so if your first wilderness trip is when you flee to the wilderness and you try to bring everything and you're fleeing from an angry mob, that heavy pack's going to get dumped and you're going to end up with nothing anyway. So that kind of few things here. Okay, our packs need to be lightweight and low bulk, something we're going to flee with. We'll talk more about that later. Matthew 24, 17 and 18. Do we have a slide on that one? I'm not sure if we do or not.
It's up.
I don't think so. Yeah, anyway, those are the verses where Jesus talks about not going, if you're on the housetop, don't come down to get your stuff out of the house. And if you're in the field, don't turn back to get your clothes. The whole idea here is not going to go back. Some people, oh, there it is. Some people interpret these verses to mean that we're not supposed to take anything. I was reading this once and somebody said, see right there, it says, don't take anything out of your house. Yeah, but is that really the emphasis here? Okay, it's like, if you're on the housetop, you don't go down to take anything. You need to just take off. There's another quote that talks about jumping from roof to roof. Kind of interesting there. You're just going to go. And so the idea that I'm getting from both of these is we're not supposed to go back. And there's a big difference between not taking anything and not going back to get anything. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And so when we flee, that's it. We're not going to go back for anything. When we flee, that's it. We're not going to be able to go back to get something that we forgot to bring. We're not going to be able to go back to get something else because we brought the wrong thing. We're not going to be able to go back to resupply. Okay, how are we going to resupply? Well, that's where the table in the wilderness figures in. People have said, I'll go when I have to, but I'm not going before. Well, if that's your attitude and your first wilderness trip, again, is when you flee, what are the chances of you really taking what you need? This also brings up the idea, we'll talk more about this too here, that our equipment that we take needs to be, I use the word sustainable for lack of a better term, but it needs to be something that will last until Jesus comes. We'll talk more about that in a minute, rather than some of the flimsy survival gadgets on the market. Remember one of the questions, just real quick here, I'll probably totally forget about this later, but somebody asked about whether we should take those space blankets. And we spent a cold night once trying those out. And they kind of work, but I don't think they worked all that good. I'd much rather have a blanket, although it's a whole lot more bulky. But the real thing that impressed me with those is by morning, like there was a group of us that we all went and did this together. A third of them had ripped somehow. Some of them majorly, some a little bit. And when I saw that, I'm like, this isn't going to last till Jesus comes, so I'm
That's
not
right.
investing in this anymore. Um, Back again to the points in that study. Can you find the quotes, Christ's Object Lessons, page 25, and Steps to Christ 9? Um, yeah, there we go. Okay. Oh, you got it in two different quotes. That's all right. This study that I talked about, that I'll email you if you want, talks about the importance of Sabbath afternoon outings. And I'm sharing this because of these quotations. I'll get to that in just a minute, but because I just looking back, I have to say that almost probably at least good half, maybe more, of what I've learned just on Sabbath afternoon outings. I've done a bunch of overnight trips too, but you can't always go on an overnight trip. But Sabbath afternoon outings are perfect, or to learn a lot of stuff about God's table in the wilderness. Just Sabbath bids us behold in his created works the glory of the Creator. And it was because he desired us to do this that Jesus bound up his precious lessons with the beauty of natural things. Okay, notice that phrase, how Jesus bound up his precious lessons with the beauty of natural things. On the holy day, holy rest day, above all other days, we should study the messages that God has written for us in nature. Okay, so what are we to do on Sabbath? We're to study the messages God has written for us in nature. Let's look at the next quote, and it kind of expands on this idea. Here we go, Steps to Christ, page 9. It says, nature and revelation alike testify of God's love. Our Father in heaven is the source of life, of wisdom, and of joy. Look at the wonderful and beautiful things of nature, and notice this next sentence here. Think of their marvelous adaptation to the needs and happiness, not only of man, but of all living creatures. So the other quote told us we need to study the messages that God has. And here we're told to think about, okay, how nature can meet our needs. Well, that's the study of wilderness survival. Now, obviously, there's some things about wilderness survival that wouldn't necessarily be Sabbath appropriate, but there's many of them that are. Okay, you can learn about wild edible plants, you can sample them, you can play with direction finding, and just on and on. There's a lot that we can learn just on simple Sabbath outings. And equipment figures into that too. So if you're not regularly going out on Sabbath afternoon into nature, I really want to encourage you to do that. Okay, and take your pack along. So I'm going to be coming back to this point here a bit later, probably. Okay. Yeah, and as you start playing with the things, okay, in nature, and gathering them and making use of them, not just identify a plant. You really want to fix it in your memory. Well, taste it. Okay, that might require making a simple fire and cooking it. If it's not fire banned yet, just go ahead and do that. If yeah. So anyway, like I said earlier, you can't play a violin unless you have a violin to play. And so here's a wild edible plant that say we gathered, but I can't cook it unless I have a cook pot. I can't cook it unless I have something to start a fire with, and so on. So you need this simple equipment. Okay, nothing's really complicated here. In order to experience these things and develop your skills, and just like with learning how to play a violin, you have to practice, and we need to practice the wilderness living skills also. This also gives us the opportunity to field test our equipment to be sure we have the right items. Okay, the last point that I want to make in connection with the study on Great Controversy 626 is that when we flee, we're going to be in companies. It says, talked about associating together in companies, solitary places. And I want to just talk about that idea. Yeah, it's there, the next to the last line. Want to talk about this idea of being in groups. Okay, when we flee, we're going to be in groups. Now I can just, see somebody thinking, I'm so glad we're going to be in a group. Somebody in the group will know what to do and be taken care of. Is that the way I would have us approach this? All right. I want you to think particularly about the parable of the talents. It's in Matthew 24, 14 to 30. I don't have a slide on that, so we're not going to read the whole parable. But notice, really want to encourage you to read the parable of talents if you haven't read it recently. Read it and notice why the servant who buried his talent was kicked out. Okay, he's kicked out for being unprofitable. And I think that's key. Don't overlook the unprofitable. And put this parable together with the first parable of this set. Parable of talents is the third parable in the set. The first parable is the parable of the faithful and unfaithful servant. Okay, they are also servants of a household, like the servants in the parable of the talents. They're servants in a household. So those two parables need to be put together. Uh, and especially the first two verses there in that first parable talks about the master putting somebody in charge of feeding the other servants. So by being a servant in the household, you get free meals. All right. You also get a place to stay. And there's several other benefits. And so this person who has buried his talent, he's enjoying the benefits of being a servant in the household, but he's not contributing to the household. Okay. He's not being profitable, and that's why he's kicked out. And so productivity, God wants us to be productive. Okay. This parable lets us know how God feels about all of this. Also put that together with the parable of the barren fig tree in Luke 13, 6 through 9. Okay. The guy plants a fig tree in his garden. Why? He wants figs. This fig tree isn't producing any figs. He says, rip it out. Okay. And same idea there in the parable of the talents. The guy hired this servant to work for him and to contribute to the household, and he's not doing it, and so he's getting kicked out. Just it makes sense. And let's be careful that we are productive and that we are an asset to the group that God connects us with. And so I've just actually, a friend of mine did a talk on this, and I kind of grabbed the title and ran with it. It says, are we going to be an asset, or are we going to be a liability to the groups that God connects us with? And let's determine that we're going to be an asset. And how are we going to be an asset? Well, it's actually like four things. And the first one is being willing to do what needs to be done. The second one is having some information. Okay. In this case, we're talking about wilderness information, knowing what plants are edible, knowing how just different knowledge. Some stuff is just knowledge like that. Knowing some of that stuff is good to know. Having equipment. Okay. Maybe you have a piece of equipment that nobody else in the group has. Well, that's going to make you an asset to that group. And then the last one is having skills. That kind of puts all this together. Actual skills rather than just knowing about it or knowing how it's done, but not really having a skill in that area. And so let's go to the slide now that has the conclusions from another study, which I'll give you the link for that one here in the chat. Yeah, okay, just hang on just a minute. Let me pull that link up because I've got it all set here to okay, there's the link for that. It's on our website, and you just click on that link. You'll get the study here. This is a very similar study, although it's more extensive than the study about Great Controversy 626 that we just went through. And I'm just going to do the conclusions here. Some of these are the same things. That's going to be good for review, conclusion kind of stuff. But it mentions a couple other points as well. And this figures into what I'm going to share next. So I'm just going to go down the bulleted points here. Okay, we will deliberately be going into the deepest wilderness we can get to. Okay, the most desolate and solitary places. We'll be staying there indefinitely. I mean, until Jesus comes, and we really don't know how long that's going to be. I know it's going to be more than just a couple of weeks. I heard somebody say that somebody was teaching that, and I know it's going to be longer than that. Anyway. We will be living by God's promises. For example, here, he has places prepared for us in the wilderness. That's Revelation 12 verse 6, I believe, talks about that. And our bread and water will be sure. It's Isaiah 33:16. We will be in groups. Yeah, we just, talked about that a minute ago. Are we going to be an asset or a liability to the group? It's okay to take survival equipment. We just won't be able to go back to get it. So this needs to be with us. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But our packs need to be lightweight and low bulk. Okay, not a stock of provisions, but rather tools to help us process the things of nature. I'll talk some more about that in a minute. We will be replenishing our supplies from nature. Okay, this is God's table in the wilderness. And our readiness needs to be a part of who we are. That's one of the things I talked about way at the very beginning. This preparation, Jesus says, be ready in Matthew 24, verse 44. The whole idea of this being a part of our character. Okay, so these are the things that we actually need. And I hope you can see this. Can you put that on full screen by any chance?
So we'll see.
Okay, we'll see what happens. All right. So there's 5 things that we call survival priorities, and these are what we need, all right, in order to stay alive. First one is shelter, because within hours we're going to need shelter from something. Water's number 2, because we can make it into the next day without water. Food is number 5. It's the last one, because we can go a couple weeks without food. Might not feel good about it, but we'll live. In the middle there, because it kind of umbrellas over all of these, is health concerns. These are things like safety, sanitation, and hygiene, just the stuff that we need to do to stay safe and healthy. And fire's also kind of in the middle, because it also might be included in almost any of the rest of these. Might want fire in connection with your shelter for light and or heat, fire to water to purify it, for cook food, for the tools, and so on. Okay, next slide. And the next column is a list of survival priority equipment. Okay, these are the actual equipment item categories that we need in order to provide ourselves with the survival priorities. And there's 3 different types of shelter that we need to concern ourselves with. The first one is clothing and footwear. The second one is bedding, and then structural shelter as well, which what we usually think about when we think of shelter. Okay, next slide. Water, we need some kind of water bottle to hold water in. Next slide. There's several different hygiene items that we need with health concerns. A lot of safety, the safety part of it, a lot of those are just practices, and the sanitation is typically just practices, but there's a whole set of hygiene items that we need. Thinking about like stuff like toothpaste and soap and deodorant and toilet paper, those kind of things. Next one. And for fire, we need fire starter and fuel. You might include that. It depends on how you're thinking about this. Usually there's plenty of sticks out in the woods, and so that's not an issue, but you need something to start the fire with. Next one. And then there's 2 different things we need to concern ourselves with food, the actual food item, that what we're going to eat, and then cook pot and utensil for cooking the food and making it more palatable and digestible. And the next slide. And beyond that, we have 4 tool categories. Tools aren't really one of the priorities themselves, but they help us to get the priorities much more efficiently. And so there's 4 different categories here: cutting and chopping tools being one, digging tools, cordage, or this is the root word there is cord. This is all types of fasteners, to hold things together. And that cordage kind of takes that main role in wilderness living. And containers, all sorts of different containers. And so these are the equipment item categories. Okay, so what we take with us equipment-wise, this is our list, our working list of what we're going to need. And just to emphasize this, let's go ahead and look at this last column. It's like, how soon will you need it? All right. Let's go next slide. Okay, if you don't have clothing or footwear, probably it's going to be as soon as possible. You're going to want some. Next slide. You want bedding by bedtime, okay, which is a matter of hours. Next slide. Yeah, structural shelter. Again, you'll want that before nightfall. Again, a matter of hours. Next slide. Okay, by the time you need some, water by the time you get thirsty, which if you're staying adequately hydrated, that's probably going to be within the hour. Health concerns. Next one. Yeah. Okay. After you eat, by the time you have to go to the bathroom, so on. So there's something that you need within hours as well. Fire. Let's look at that one. Probably before nightfall, because really hard to go out and gather firewood and get a fire going after dark. Okay. Food. By the time you get hungry, again, we're talking about hours here. Next one. Okay, but I need to cook something. Maybe you have a meal that you don't need to cook, but when you do need to cook, it's going to be there. So again, probably within a day. Next slide. Okay, so then we're getting in, out of the priorities themselves, but also into the area of tools, cutting and chopping, by the time you need to make something. And that's a really, really broad category. But just about everything that is made, you will need a knife in some way or other. Even making food, knife is one of your main utensils there. So next slide. Okay, and this one says by the time you need to dig something, well, this could be short-term, long-term, but frequently you'll need to level out some ground or dig a fire pit or dig a hole to go to the bathroom in. So we're talking about hours here again. Next slide. And so by the time you need to gather, and that's going to happen frequently enough too. And next one. Containers. Yeah, when you need to keep stuff together. Well, that's probably going to be as soon as possible also. So you just notice all of these, you're going to need it within hours. And I think that's really important because, again, as being Laodiceans, we tend not to recognize our needs. And this really spells it out. This is stuff that we need. And in Matthew 6, Jesus points out that your Heavenly Father knows that you need all of this stuff. He attached it to the animals as body parts. He gave us the intelligence to figure out what we need and the ability to plan ahead so that we can bring this stuff with us. And anyway, that's the topic of this whole presentation here. So let's go back to the survival kit criteria one. Okay. Yes, that's the one right there. Awesome. Good. Okay, so what do we want to put in our survival kit? Now, I put this list together several years ago, and I would actually maybe add a couple more points here, which I'll give you in a minute. But the first one is what is it based on? What goes into our kit? Well, number one, it's based on the survival priorities and the survival priority equipment that we just looked at. Okay, so I mean that's the base list for this. Number two is the conclusions from the study about how the prophecies describe our end time wilderness experience, and that's the list that we went through just a minute ago too. I have Coakla's story down here. Let me give you the link for that. This is a real interesting story. It's a true story, by the way, happened in New Mexico in, I believe, 1870. It was about a group of Apache Indians. Remember, these are desert Indians. They were down in New Mexico, and this is the masters of desert survival. One of the tribes that gave cavalry the most trouble, and just because they were so good at what they did. And so, here's this whole tribe of people who are masters of desert survival, and they were forced onto the reservation, and things aren't going so well, and they decide, this is stupid. We'll die fighting before we just sit here and die. And so they escaped and went back to their ancestral homeland. And the story is about when they were attacked. I mean, they knew that it was just a matter of time before they figured out where they were and they attacked them. And so this story is about their attack. And here are these people, masters of desert survival, and they're being attacked, being shot at, and yet they still grab certain equipment items as they flee. And that lets me know, okay, equipment really is important. If here are people who know their stuff and they're living it, and yet they're making it a point to grab certain things as they're fleeing. In my thinking, I put this to please read this story. It's really interesting. In my thinking, I put these together with an experience I had. I remember walking through the room. I forget a lot of details. It was several years ago. And somebody was watching a program on television, and it kind of caught my attention. And what this program on the TV was, there's different programs where civilians can go and military training. And this was a video of civilians taking British SAS desert survival training. The British SAS, they're like our Navy SEALs and our airborne ranger types. And so they're getting this training, and it kind of caught my eye. And I came into the room just before they had a mock raid, night raid. Okay, so like their camp got raided, and they're, it's a fake raid, so they're not using actual bullets, but they try to simulate that. And they had a prearranged rendezvous point, like the people in Kuwait's story did. And here's one of the students walking into the rendezvous point, and they're met by one of the instructors. And the instructor asks them, "Where's your equipment?" And the student responds, "Well, it was so real. I was just running for my life." And anyway, the instructor chews them out as only military instructors can. But the main message he was saying is, if the bullets don't kill you, the desert will. Never leave your equipment behind. And so I'm putting these two stories together. Here's people who know what they're talking about, and they recognize the importance of equipment. And here the average person, the average Adventist, doesn't recognize the importance of equipment. In fact, many of us think that we're not supposed to. That's just setting ourselves up for a bad way. And it's not what God requires of us at all. So this is one of the things that the kit's based on. Another one is the question. And this question fits right in with going on Saturday afternoon nature outings. The question is, what am I willing to carry when I'm not planning to spend the night, so that I would have it with me if I did have to spend the night? Now, the interesting thing is, I know of several groups that have gone on simple Sabbath afternoon hikes and ended up spending the night for one reason or another. Anyway, I learned a lot by studying these experiences, and this kind of fits into that. Okay, when you go on a Sabbath afternoon nature hike, okay, most people, again, don't bring anything. And that happened with these groups. And so here they are out there with nothing. Okay. But yet this question here, as I've rolled it around in my head for a lot, this will help us keep our packs lightweight. It'll help us keep extras out of the pack that don't really need to be there. And I'll delineate here a little bit more later as we go on with items. But anymore on even a simple Sabbath afternoon walk, I want to take the basics with me. If there's absolutely any chance at all of anything, for two reasons. If I do end up having to spend the night, I'll have it, but also I'll have the equipment to be able to get the experience with whatever we happen to find along the trail. And so this is a really good question. What am I willing to carry when I'm not planning to spend the night, so that I would have it with me if I did? Okay, that helps sort out a lot of things, that question. Okay, here's another question. and this is coming at things from a little different angle. It says, if we had nothing in a survival situation, okay, so let's say we're in a long-term survival situation or longer term, and we don't have anything, none of us brought anything, okay, and therefore we're going to have to gather and or make everything we need. Okay, we had the list there just a minute ago with the survival priority equipment list. Okay, so we start making these things. Okay, what would we continue to carry with us whenever we move in? Now, if we build a shelter, we're probably not going to take that shelter with us. But let's say put together a fire drill set so that we can have fire. We're going to carry that set with us? Of course, right? When we get to our next camp, we might not be able to find materials to make it, or we might not have time to make the set. And we know this set works because we've made fire with it before, right? So that's, going to be the safest and most practical thing to do is take it with us. And so, just kind of go through that list and notice what these things are. Well, why not bring those things in the first place? You can't bring a cabin with you, but you can bring, some tarp and some twine with you for a shelter. You can bring some kind of fire starter with you and so on. And then the last thing on the list here is there's a lot of field testing and personal experience that's gone into what I'm going to be sharing with you here the next bit. So just a couple other thoughts, I said here that I wanted to share before we actually start looking at equipment is God's table in the wilderness plus sustainable equipment. Okay, is what's going to get us through that time. Okay, and sustainable equipment, I mean by that is equipment that's going to last until Jesus comes. I guess we should talk about that a little bit. Probably the classic illustration there is matches. Okay, matches will help you start a fire. They work good. I heard this and I would recommend this if you're learning how to start a fire, start by using matches. It's a measured amount of heat source that you have to make the fire with, and that just teaches you a lot of things in that process. Okay, but if let's say you have a bunch of matches and that's your fire starter from now till Jesus comes. Well, sooner or later, you're going to end up using that last match, and then what? And so you want to have sustainable, what I call sustainable equipment, something that's going to last until Jesus comes. And we'll talk about that in terms of fire here real soon. But I just thought of this just before we started doing this. As you're going through your pack, let's say you unpack your pack and you're repacking or you're pulling stuff out, it doesn't matter. You're going through what you have in your pack. Learn to think of it in two different categories. Okay, first one is something that's going to get used up as I use it, like food. Okay, I eat the food, that's it. It's going to get used up. Toilet paper, that's going to get used up, and so on. So if it's something that's going to get used up, then you need to learn how to get more of that from nature. And that's where God's table in the wilderness comes in. The other category are things that don't get used up as they use, things that you can use over and over again. Okay, this is what I mean by sustainable equipment. And everything in your pack needs to fit in one of those two categories. Especially the equipment part. That's the main thing, because the stuff that gets used up, well, you're going to get more of that from nature anyway. So that needs to be your focus there. So your pack needs to be built around these sustainable equipment items. Things that you can use over and over again that will help you process what's in nature to get what you need. The equivalent of the bear's claws and fur coat sort of thing, like we talked about earlier. The other point here is we need to learn how to depend on what God has provided in nature. And I think this was one of the key things that jumped out at me as I was going down the list of questions. Um, Most people don't think this way. You know, Holy Spirit has trained me to think this way. And I just want to pass that on to you. Just learn to think this way. Learn how to depend on what God has provided in nature. And so that's the source of everything that we need. The equipment just helps us to get that. We're not relying on the equipment. The equipment is it's useful. Okay, what we need is coming from nature. And rather than trying to carry stuff, I remember we were talking with somebody about this stuff, and we were just at the beginning, and they said, "Oh, my pack's going to be really heavy." They were thinking having enough food to last until Jesus comes, kind of idea. And that's not going to work, right? Angry mob's going to make that pack get dumped, and there you are with nothing. So God's trying to teach us to rely on Him rather than relying on the supply chain. And I think that's one of the big reasons why He's having us do a wilderness experience here. Because for the rest of eternity, we're going to be getting the things we need from what He provides in nature. And this is going to be a crash course in that. One last item here, and these kind of fit into this criteria here, and they kind of don't. So that's why I didn't put them on the list. But this last one here, I want to encourage you to start making as much of your own equipment as possible. We'll talk about that as I'm demonstrating things, but some things it's just not practical to make, but the things that you are able to make, I want to encourage you to do that. This is going to help you develop some skills, and it will really help. So let's go ahead and pull the slides down. I want to start by talking about the pack thing. There was a couple different questions that involve pack weight. And the rule is, I've heard both 20% and 25%, but we're going to go with the 20%. The rule is it's more about 20% of your body weight. So just real simple, if you weigh 100 pounds, that's 20-pound pack. I weigh just a little over 200 pounds, and that's still my goal. Okay. I'm allowing myself 21, 22, 23 pounds maybe. But that's my goal, to get my pack down to that weight. If you want to look at it a little different, some of you are in other countries, that's like 10 kilograms, which is, roughly 22 pounds. So that's a good target weight. A big problem with that is a lot of packs empty weigh 5 pounds or 6 pounds even, right? That's not acceptable. Okay, so come out, look at a different pack if that's the kind of pack you're looking at. Just kind of think historically what different people in other ages and other places in the world have used for packs. I'm just going to share something real simple here. Actually is up into Central through South America. The pack that they use is just a square or slightly rectangular piece of heavy cloth, about maybe 4 foot by 4 foot, 5 foot by 5 foot. Let me put the word here. I've seen it spelled a lot of different ways. I'll just Google that. I think you will get something, and you see how they use this. And I experimented with that. I learned it like when I went doing mission trips to Bolivia, and the climate there's a lot colder, and you're basically wrapping yourself up in a blanket. And so here in California, it was really warm. Wintertime would be fine, but I wouldn't want to have to wear one in summer, so I would wear it some other way. Also, furoshiki, Japanese. Look up the different furoshiki packs. They use these square pieces of cloth for all sorts of stuff, but you can see several pack designs as well on that. That sounds really simple and maybe almost not practical because it's so simple. However, there's a big advantage to having one of these types of packs. And that is when you get to camp, you have a piece of material that's useful for all sorts of other things rather than an empty bag sitting there. So anyway, just would encourage you to play with this something. I don't know that that's where you're going to end up, but just to throw out the idea of options. Um, there was a couple questions about different features. Actually, you want as few features as possible because the more features you have, the heavier that pack's going to be. The main thing I would want is two padded shoulder straps that are at least 2 inches wide. A lot of these other features are simply a matter of I don't use felt. I know a lot of people do. And so I'll let you choose your own waist belt there. I'm not going to try to tell you something I don't know, just because I don't use one. I haven't for a long time. And also there's a question about sternum straps. That again, as far as I'm concerned, that's just personal preference. It also might figure into pack design a little bit. But anyway, for that, let me encourage you. I'm gonna kind of split things here a little bit, and I hope this works. I want to encourage you to put together two different packs. Uh, they can be the same equipment, so it's not like you got to buy two sets of equipment. But I have my main grab and go pack, and I guess I should show you. Okay, there is my main grab and go pack. And I have a Sabbath afternoon pack. And here's my Sabbath afternoon pack, or one of them. The same basic equipment, okay, is what goes in both of these. Probably the biggest difference is in my main grab and go pack, I have your bedding, my sleeping bag and whatnot. I'm not going to haul that on the day pack, day hike. However, uh, actually, I went down to the fabric store and just bought some wool cloth and made myself a very lightweight, wool blanket, so to speak, that I would have, and that's what I carry in my on my Sabbath afternoon hike pack. But representatives of all the rest of this stuff goes there too. And so you're still learning with the same basic equipment, and you can get all the experience that you need to get there with these. So anyway, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between the two. What item might be good for that, might for the other. For your main grab and go pack, I have down here at least 32 liters, 2,000 cubic inches, kind of somewhere in that, maybe a little more if you're a bigger person. That's a tight fit, and for some people are going to have a sleeping bag that'll fill that whole thing up right now. So this is my sleeping bag, okay? It's a down economy bag, and it's an older one, and I know those aren't cheap. I had to save a bit to be able to pay for that at the time, and since it's older, I'm having to think about maybe replacing it here and doing that again. Anyway, we'll talk more about that in a bit. So let me finish talking about packs here first. There was questions about colors of the pack, and just as a general rule, you want earth tone colors for all of this. don't like camouflage. I do have one pack. I should probably show you that pack here. This is, if I'm going to do like a more guy, because I need some more capacity with that nice, comfortable pack that works for me. I had another pack, and this is the way the shoulder straps were. I wasn't happy with it, and so I went down and I got this one here. I like the way this pack works. I don't like the fact that it's camouflage. I think camouflage, you see somebody walking down the street, and if they're wearing camouflage, and immediately you're like, what's this guy up to? Whereas with just earth tone colors, nobody thinks anything. So, earth tones are camouflage that isn't camouflage. So what you got there, Dana?
This is the Hidden Woodsman. It's the
Oh,
day.
I've heard good stuff about that.
What's that?
I said I've heard good stuff about that, Pat.
Yeah, I think that it's 30 liters. It may be 35. I'm not sure. It's not
Yeah.
that big.
Okay.
But it's great. I usually right now just use it for a day pack. Like if we need to pack our
Hmm.
lunch and then a few things if we're gonna go out
Right.
for the day. But I'm considering making this my grab and go because
Sure.
it's very simple. The pack itself is not that heavy. I'd have to weigh it. But it's very basic.
What materials it?
Canvas. It may be that what's that Cordova ripstop stuff, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah, that's good.
straps are nice and wide. They're over 2 inches, I think, and they're pretty well padded. It does have an optional waist pack. It comes off, and it's also got an axe carrier right here. It's got a little pocket that's not
Interesting.
sewed at the bottom,
Yeah.
so your axe fits in there.
Yeah.
And they seem pretty well made, but
Nice.
Very well. They do have a little bit of the molly webbing on the sides.
we did lose a strap on it though.
Well, that's the waist
Oh,
pack
really?
that's removable. It can come off.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of hard to get it on screen, but if you go to the Hidden Woodsman, it's the day.
Yeah. Like I said, I've heard good stuff about that, Pat.
Yeah, they're not cheap. They are
No.
not cheap.
No.
But it's very well made. Very well made.
Just before we move on, been tempted a couple times already here to move on from packs. But one last point on packs. Somebody asked how to pack it. And you want to put the heaviest items close to you and kind of in the middle. That's kind of from my perspective, that's a really general rule. Uh, you have to fit things in the pack the way that they fit in the pack. I mean, that's bottom line. And so you can't always follow these rules. But as much as possible, put the heavier things kind of in the middle of the pack and close to your body. Anyway, again, that's general rule, but in practice, you have to just get it in there however it's going to fit, which may not be able to follow the rules here by doing that. Next thing on my list is clothing. Again, earth tone colors. Couple questions about what kind of socks. Definitely recommend wool socks. I don't like the heavy ones, although in winter that would be great. You all just need to understand I'm in California. I mean, you bloom where you're planted, and this is where God put me. When I was learning this stuff, or most of this stuff, I'm always adding to my knowledge, but when my big lump of knowledge, learning is sorting a lot of these things out. I was able to go out we averaged doing an overnight trip once a month. And on just about every Sabbath afternoon, we were also going out. We didn't have something else going on. So, we were getting real serious about learning as much as we could as quickly as possible. And because we were here in California, we were able to do that. I have spent time in other areas. We spent like a year and a half up in Chetwynd, British Columbia, and at 40 below, you're not doing a whole lot of that kind of stuff. Also spent some time in Colorado, and when the ground's just covered with snow, you're limited what you can do also. So I sympathize with those of you, who live wherever you live. Just, work with what you've got and do what you can, and God will bless. Okay.
And we pray
So,
that our flight is not in the winter nor on the Sabbath day. I pray that. I seriously take that admonition.
yeah. Well, and the thing that I don't think, because people are praying that, and Jesus told us to, right? I
Mhm.
don't think we will have to flee in the winter, but that doesn't mean that we won't experience winter while we're out there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the other piece that goes with that, I think a lot of people think, oh, we're just going to go somewhere and then plop ourselves there and wait for Jesus to come. I don't think it's going to work out that way either. I think we're going to be moving around.
And I,
A lot of the people that were living off the land, I mean, the native, groups, uh, they were living some nomadic and moved to the area. And they had a lot of them had like a seasonal circuit that they would go through every year as the different resources came in season in those different areas. They would just work their way around throughout the year. And I see us living that way because that's how they were making use of God's table in the wilderness. And we're going to be doing the same thing there too. So it's really to study the lifestyle of the natives that lived in your area, wherever you are, and learn whatever you can from them. I know that's been one of my major knowledge sources. So just, not just what they had and what wild plants they ate, but also how did they make it work with their lifestyle, because that's a big piece of it. Somebody asked about shoes. I'm not sure what you call this. I think some people would call them trail runners or lightweight hiking boots, um, walking shoe. I don't know. But anyway, this is what I would recommend. I mean, obviously, this isn't going to work in snow. I have another pair of boots that I have had for years that are, heavy hiking boot um, that would work in snow. Um, but these work almost the rest of the year. Um, I think bottom line here is I can offer suggestions, but you got to do what works for you, okay? And your area, your climate, what works for me might not work there, and I totally get that because God's moved me around. I've been to other places and just had to modify things and do something else. What you got there, Dana?
Well, I'd like to just show a couple of things. When my husband and I go backpacking, which is not often enough to suit me, I like Topos.
Sure.
They have the Vibram sole.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can't hardly wear the things out. I mean, you'll wear the top out before you'll wear the bottom out. But
Yeah.
these are very, very comfortable, but they're not warm at all. Me, when I have to flee, I hope these are on my feet. Now, I know that a lot of people don't agree because they are a little bit on the heavy side, but they're not that heavy. These are Bellevilles, and these are my brand new pair. I haven't even broken these in yet. But my older pair I got shortly after Kevin and I married, so I've probably had them 13 years. And I absolutely love those boots. I cook in them. I stand in the kitchen. If I happen to have to go outside and do some chore or something,
Yeah.
sometimes they're just on my feet and I cook in them because they're so comfortable. So, I feel a lot more secure with something like this on my foot because I tend to twist my ankles and stuff.
Um, Somebody asked about the best brand here. I was just glancing over at the questions, I mean, the chat line. You got to get what works for you, okay? Somebody asked about the fit. How should the boots fit? And they need to be, they need to hold your foot, your foot needs to not be sloppy in there, but it also needs to not be tight. And that's, I don't know how else to describe that.
Break them in before.
Yes, yes,
Don't break them in on a backpack or a hike.
yeah.
Break
And
them in
so,
around the house.
And you don't want them too loose because you're going to probably be on a lot of uneven terrain. And so your feet are going to be sliding a lot. And so to create a blister is going to happen quite quickly.
Yeah, but you want it
right.
big enough to wear
And
once.
and a lot of hiking, I'll say shoes, including boots here, are laced up all the way down to the toe. That's for a reason. So you can tighten up that toe area. If you have a long downhill stretch on you, you
Mhm.
tighten that up so your toes don't and then hit. I saw somebody's foot who they didn't do that, and their toes were just smashing into the front of the boot, like the whole way down this mountain. They were all their toes were like all black and blue. You don't want to do that. You got to take really good care of your feet.
Yeah,
Um, I remember hearing sayings about like the army moves on its feet kind of thing, and for that the officers really needed to guard their men's feet because that's where it was all about.
I
And
was,
and it, yeah, very very good advice.
I was,
Don't take it lightly.
no, I was a runner for a while. For anyway, but I learned that lesson. Your shoes are very important, and they need
Yeah,
to fit right.
well, the reason I got these Belvilles to begin with is I've got weird feet. Um, and I had looked and looked and looked, and it finally occurred to me, wait a minute, these military guys hike all day long and march in these boots.
yeah,
They work for them. And when I changed my mindset and I went to these boots, it works for me. It may not work for everybody, but it is I love them. I wear them even in the summer, and I don't find, unless
yeah,
I'm here in Alabama and it's 100 degrees, my feet don't get too hot.
yeah. I need to share a story here. My Becky, my wife, um, was she'd got a pair of hiking boots and they just didn't fit her foot right. And we went back to try something else, after playing for a couple of months, and got another pair. And anyway, we found out that the different shoemakers have different what they call lasts, which is the pattern that they make the boot or the shoe on. And shoemakers have different ones. And so depending on the shape of your feet, okay, a certain brand may work or may not work for you. And so since that experience, I'm really reluctant to say, oh, you need to get such and such a brand. No, you need to get what brand works for your foot. And,
Right.
and that's going to require a little bit of research on your own part there to figure that out.
That's
Um,
a good point.
yeah. So I don't know what brand to tell you. We're not done with clothing though. So I need to say something here. Like I said earlier, I've taken a lot of people on their first trip, and frequently what's happened, I've had to like go through their packs because it just weighs this horrible amount of weight, and they're trying to take a clean change of clothes for every day. And I remember this one, the conference here where we used to be. Actually, this conference where we're at now does it too. But they have a thing called TBA, Teen Bible Academy, and that's based on three. There we go, three. The first, it used to last 3 weeks long. It's been shortened to about 10 days or a week now. But the first component was solitude. They would take the kids out backpacking for a while for solitude and study. And the second component was on study. And then the last one was service. And I think that's a really good plan for anybody thinking about putting their youth program together or anybody else kind of program. But I wasn't able to go with them, but they got me to come and help get the kids all packed up for the backpack trip once. And so I just brought the kids, okay, empty everything out. Empty it all out. I just put it in there. Yeah, empty it out. I need to see everything that's in there. They took it all out and I start throwing stuff out. You don't need this. You don't need this. You don't need this. You know this. And I remember this one girl in particular, and she was like, "You gotta have it." And anyway, you don't need a new change of clothes for every day. And I remember seeing her after the trip, and she was like, "Oh, Mr. Buller, thank you so much for making me take that stuff out. I wish I would have taken more." So, experience really kicks in here. And, these people who are waiting to go on their first trip when we have to flee, I'm really feeling sorry for them. Um, anyway, I won't say any more. But
You need to say more, Brother Jim, because
just,
these
yeah,
points get too heavy. You're not going to carry that stuff.
well, one of the things that's really helped me is understand that most people who have lived on planet Earth, like historically, across the ages, most people have only had one change of clothes to their name. Now we've got a whole closet and drawers full of stuff, right? And so that isn't the way it's always been. You look at, especially like the people in Bible times, some of the Bible stories. I mean, to be given a second change of clothing. I mean, that was a big deal because they only had one change of clothes to their name. And so, a lot of people have lived that way their whole lives. We can too. We're not used to it. We feel uncomfortable doing it at first, but it works. And so, what I've come up with, and I've played with this a lot, and it works, is to have, I'm expanding, I take two changes of clothes along when I go on a trip, backpacking trip, multi-day or just weekend, doesn't matter. They'll take a pair of like something for warm weather, like short sleeve shirt kind of thing, and then something for cold weather. Somebody asked about pants in particular. My favorite pair of pants that I've ever had were a pair of one of those zip out pants, where it could be shorts or you unzip it and then you get rid of the lower part, right? And that gave me my two sets of clothes right there. And it was hardly taking up any pack weight when I zipped the legs off, but I could put the legs back on if I wanted them. And then I'll take like maybe a t-shirt and a wool, flannel shirt type thing, but wool. And uh, wearing one pair of underwear, one extra pair of underwear. And so basically I'm washing clothes real regularly. Okay. But that's okay. You can just hang it on your pack and let it dry while you're walking along if you're still walking in. But that goes a long way towards keeping your back weight down. We wouldn't need all these extra clothes. Most of our brothers and sisters that have been here on this planet haven't had it anyway. Definitely two pair of socks. You can double that up if you need to, and so on. So, I'm not saying go just one pair of clothes, but two pair of clothes, and choose wisely, very wisely. One thing I almost always carry, even in my like Sabbath or noon pack, is just a simple wool hat. You lose over 70% of your body heat from your neck up. And so if you get cold, two easy things to carry in your pack. I mean, how heavy is this? How much weight, bulk does it take, space does it take up in your pack? But this is going to go a long way towards keeping you warm. The scarf on in connection with this, that's going to make a big difference. And so, like I said, I even have one of these in my simple shoulder bag pack here. Let's move on to bedding. Or do you have anything more you want to say about clothes?
No, that's pretty much it. Just make sure that
Okay.
when you buy quality.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Don't waste your time on cheap stuff.
Somebody did ask a question, Brother Jim, about alternatives to wool if they're sensitive. I think merino and alpaca
Yes. Yes.
are good.
Those would be the two I would recommend also. I played around with fleece, polar fleece or whatever. It's a synthetic material. the thing that I dislike about it most is it's synthetic, but if a spark gets on it, you got a hole in it right now.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get a spark on wool, you got time to brush it off before it does any damage. So
One thing I will say
I
about,
don't
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
One thing I will say about the polypro stuff, I agree, about the fire situation, but just general wear, I find that if I wear my wool long johns with a polypro layer over, it is incredibly lightweight and warm. Wool
Yeah,
is
I've
heavy.
never experimented with that, but yeah, I can see that working really well.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to bedding since you mentioned that anyway. I showed you my sleeping bag here a little earlier. Um, to be honest with you, let's talk about wool blankets and then I'll bring it all together. This is a military surplus wool blanket. It came white. It was like one of those hospital blankets. I dyed it with walnut hull dye. Um, I've done a lot of nights. That time I told you I was going out year round. We did a lot of blanket trips. That's where we just took a blanket rather than sleeping bag. And you learn how to build a really good shelter by doing that, especially when you're going out in the winter with just a blanket. We learned how to make it work, and that's a whole class in itself. So I'm not going to get into all of that right now. But you will lose more of your body heat to the cold ground than the cold air. So you want something insulating you from the cold ground. We call that a debris bed. We just gather up whatever's on the forest floor. Pine needles work really good. Grass works really good. Some leaves work really good. Some don't. Anyway, you have to experiment with what's in your area, but just give yourself a good 6 to 12 inch layer of something underneath you. That's going to keep you warmer than whatever you put on top. And so that with a shelter that you can have a fire out in front, basically it's what made it work in the wintertime for us. A couple times we'd wake up to snow in the morning. So, just let you know what kind of temperatures we were working with. But this is I have another one that's even heavier weight, but this blanket lives in my grab and go pack. Okay. Because I've gone back and forth and back and forth and back and forth in my head, when I flee, and that's it, not coming back for nothing. Do I want to take my blanket with me or do I want to take my sleeping bag with me? And bottom line is I want both. And so, especially since my sleeping bag isn't, I think it's only a 25-degree bag. It's not one of those zero bags. And so this with the wool blanket, okay, gives me the warmth rating that I would want. But the wool blanket is so versatile. It's not just a blanket. Okay, like we talked about Elijah with his mantle. Okay, that was like his outer garment. Um, the early Americans and Indians in that same era had what they called a match coat. And I remember reading about a match coat for years and years and never really knew what it was. And then I finally found out, and I'm like, oh, this makes total sense. And so basically a way to turn a blanket into a jacket. And so, yeah, there were some questions about a jacket, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I mean, like, I want a long sleeve wool shirt. I want to take that along anyway. But that and my blanket gives me the jacket that most people would be used to. And then I also have my blanket to make my bed warmer. And I don't have to carry as big a bulk sleeping bag result too. So, these are all just little tricks about keeping your weight down that I've learned to work with. Um, there's a bunch of other uses for blankets. Don't have time. We're already pushing time here to share all of that, but you can make a stretcher out of the blanket if you have to, and so on. Anyway, I already told you the story about the emergency blanket, so I'll skip that. Food. When we flee, okay, we're not trying to take enough food to last us till Jesus comes. How much do we take? Well, from the research that I've done, and particularly a quote on Patriarchs and Prophets 483, I'll let you read that on your own. But a 3 days ration seems to be appropriate. That gives you the opportunity to spend a day or two traveling if you need to before you have to start worrying about food. On the other hand, if you're able to gather stuff, you could stretch that 3 days out. I could see that conceivably being stretched out to over a month by supplementing that with what you're able to gather along the way. But to bring about 3 days worth of food, you're not trying to take enough to last until Jesus comes. You're just taking enough to get you out in the wilderness where you can kind of get set up and learn your way around. What to bring? I'm reluctant to share there just because I've discovered the one sure way to get people upset and make them complain is to give them food they're not used to. I mean, never mind whether it's any good or not. It's just if it's food that they're not used to, you're going to have people complaining. And I totally sympathize with Moses out there in the wilderness. Because that's really what was going on there. It wasn't that they didn't have food or it wasn't any good. It just wasn't what they were used to. Anyway, I've worked at camps too long, I guess. But get what works for you. Bring stuff that's like high nutrition that isn't going to get all crushed up in your pack. Like nuts and dried fruit, and I like hardtack biscuits really well. A lot of different things. Yeah, dehydrated stuff or freeze dried if possible, because that's going to give you the best nutrition to weight ratio. But just figure out what works for you. And then we got, all sorts of different dietary restrictions and stuff that different people have. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to take for food. God's given you a brain, use it. As far as a cooking system, and well, let me start with the Sabbath afternoon pack idea. Here, can you see this? This is from Self-Reliance Outfitters. I really like this system. Here's my canteen. Okay, it fits right into the pot. The pot doesn't take up any extra space. I have a cook pot. I have a way to cook food if I want to. I have a way to boil water if I need to. Okay. Yeah, you got the same thing there, just different version. So I really like this system, and I'm tempted to put this into my main pack. However, this, is what I have in my Sabbath afternoon pack right now. In my main pack, I have a larger kettle. Okay, water bottle about the same. And you want a metal single-walled water bottle if possible that you could boil water in. Okay, but this is a 2-liter bush pot, they call them. Yeah. This is stainless steel. I trust it more than the other metals. And when you're actually doing wilderness living, you might want to boil, this is give me 2 quarts worth rather than just 1 quart. In other words, if I'm going to make some stew up for the whole group, I can do that. Whereas before, I'm just working with individual sizes there, and so on. So I see the value of taking something a little larger. So like this pot lives in my grab and go pack. And so that it does not wasted space, that's all full of food. So really all for your cook system, okay? All you need is, and I'll pick this one here just because it's here. You need a cook pot, you need a spoon, and you need a knife, which you got anyway. We'll talk about knives in a minute. Like that's all I take for my cook system. Okay. And then, the fire is part of that too, but that's its own thing. So you don't need a whole bunch of this is a wooden spoon, kind of goes with the idea I shared earlier about making as much of your own equipment as possible. That's really all you need. Um, you might want more, but I'm not willing to carry it. You shouldn't be either. Yes. Your hygiene system, that's something you're going to have to work out for you. And first aid, let's not get into that because that could be a whole class in itself. Somebody asked about cell phones. Personally, I'm planning to smash my cell phone and stick it under a rock when I first start playing. However, I've heard of people downloading like plant identification apps and stuff, and I could see some value in that. So anyway, I'm just letting you know what I'm going to do with mine. Bible. Here we're up against weight. My Bible, I should probably show it to you, but it's one of those nice, big, thick things that's like this big, right? Uh, I'm just not willing to carry that weight, and the word that you have hidden in your heart is the most valuable anyway. I do have a New Testament Psalms and Proverbs. Let's see, that I have in my grab and go pack. Uh, um, it's like a little pocket size. Here we go. Okay, that's what I'm taking in. That's what I have in my pack. New Testament Psalms and Proverbs, along with the little blue piece there is a songbook, and then the other blue one here is some Ellen White quotations, and then this one is a little booklet on wilderness skills that I put together, and then I think one of these other booklets here is like Coakla's story that I talked about earlier, and some other stuff. So I've got some other worship materials in there along with that. Yeah,
This is the whole Bible.
The whole Bible.
That's the
Wow, that's got a
this is
really little print.
it does. And so what I have in here is a little magnifying glass in case I
Yes,
lose my glasses. And that
yeah,
has dual purpose too. You can use it
right.
to start fire with.
Nice, nice.
You broke up there. We didn't catch it.
What?
You broke up and we didn't catch what you just said.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just saying that's a nice little Bible you have. Okay, so the last two things I have on my list are fire system and then tools. Um, for fire system, we're back to our sustainability idea here with this one. Okay, what type of fire system you have that's going to be sustainable, that's going to enable you to make fire from now until Jesus comes. Um, Obviously, there is the fire by friction, learning, and I recommend you learn how to do that. Um,
Hmm.
That is not easy.
but it's a skill that's definitely worth learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this little pouch, I have my flint and steel kit. I already took this can out of it. In this can, this is a historical flint and steel kit. This goes back at least to Roman times, I think before then. But basically, here's the flint. This is specially heat treated carbon steel, and then a piece of flint rock. And basically, what you're doing is you're scraping a little tiny piece of metal off to make sparks, and you're catching those sparks in a piece of charred cloth or charred punk wood. Dana said I should demonstrate this whole thing, but I don't think I'm going to. Um, and then you can make fire. Now you're going to run out of charred cloth, and so punk wood works just rotten wood.
Mhm.
You save that and char that the same way. Um,
There's videos.
anyway, yeah, there's videos how to make that work. So check that one out, okay? Because this will last until Jesus comes. So like this is my preferred fire starting method.
Mhm.
Um, to be honest, I have been rethinking the idea of a ferro rod. Is that what you got there?
Mhm.
What you
Hmm.
got?
The Fuhrer stick.
Uh, yeah, the ferrocerium rods, they will wear out. So I kind of been not excited about them in the past. However, I got to thinking that, I mean, they're so prevalent anymore. They're a lot easier to get a hold of than to get hold of one of these. And if everybody in the group, and we were talking about being in groups, if everybody in the group had one, that probably would last. You know, one person can make fire, and that's going to benefit the whole group. So if, you know, just for the sake of being able to get something, uh, I would recommend, you know, going, you know, maybe on your goal to get a flint and steel kit up and running and learn how to make that work. But in the meantime, get a ferrocerium rod, and I wouldn't get one of those huge monster ones that they've got. Those things weigh a ton. But get something like the size you had there, Dana, and learn how to make that work. There's some really good videos out how to make that work. Coal Cracker Bushcraft has
Yeah, cool.
a couple really good videos on how to teach
Somebody,
yourself how to
Brother
do
Jim,
that.
somebody made the comment that they're saving dryer lint and hair from their hairbrush for starting fires.
You know, I got dryer lint down here on my list. I'm sharing this more because of a principle behind this is dryer lint works. Okay. I don't trust dryer lint just because it's synthetic. And so when it burns, it's going to be, you know, I mean, if you got the average clothes, there's going to be some synthetic fibers in there. And for all I know, and they don't smell good. For all I know, they're poisonous. And I just don't want to do that. The other piece of that, though, which I think is the bigger issue, is don't, it's a crutch. Okay. Dryer lint works, but it's a crutch. And if you keep using that crutch, never learn what's out in nature that works, because there's plenty of stuff out in nature that'll work just as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to learn what that stuff is. And by using dryer lint, you're depriving yourself of that experience. And like I said earlier, we need to learn to depend on what God has placed in nature. And He has placed good tinder materials out of nature. And so we need to learn what those are,
Where to find them.
how to make them work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you
and
put that
and so
down?
don't cheat yourself by using dryer lint.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. We've got videos on starting a fire when it's
Sure.
wet. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I saw this sitting on the table here. I haven't talked about it yet. This is what I carry for twine. I hope somebody in my group also has some paracord or bank line, because that is strong enough that it will hold, you know, a person's weight. And we have had to lower ourselves down a little cliff once, and we use paracord for that. But this is just jute twine, like from the hardware store. I like this for several reasons. It's cheap, and I don't feel bad if I lose it. Or, you know, you're making shelter and you're tying it up, and you end up leaving little pieces of this behind or whatever. It's going to biodegrade, no problem. You know, I've pulled into some campsites, and here's all these pieces of chopped up paracord from the group that was in there before. I don't know. Anyway, it's just ugly, but this will biodegrade. Feel badly when it happens. And for most shelter stuff, this will work. If you need more strength, just double it up a little bit.
Brother
But
Jim?
this also, if just one more thing, if you're in a a pinch and you don't have tinder, you can take this apart, shred it up, and use this for tinder. It works very well. It's got oils in it for preservatives, so it's almost cheating. But you know, I'd rather somebody use this than dryer lint. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Um, there was a question here. Hold on just a second that I think it's a good time. Somebody keeps asking and has asked several times about the brand of the flint and steel kit. Are you still making these?
No, but I'm in a situation now where I think I could. It's just we've been scrambling getting our garden going, and I haven't been able to devote time to that yet.
Okay. What would you, somebody's asking for a brand, I don't know, there's people on eBay and Amazon that sell these. What would you tell people to look for?
Yeah, same thing there. Shop around. Prices are all over the place, literally. I would also check with Cold Cracker, Bushcraft, and Self-Reliance Outfitters. I think they both carry it too. But again, I would also check eBay and compare prices because
There's a
they're all over the place.
Yeah, there's a guy that we did buy from on eBay. He was very nice to work with, but I didn't find that his steals were that effective. That you had to really work to get a spark with his steals.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard one to know before you buy it, especially when you're buying
Right,
online.
right.
Yeah. I noticed this sitting on my table here. I should have talked about this earlier. This is my water system. Um, this is like just the Sawyer. These are fairly common filters. Um, and I've heard about these that go with it. Uh, is the brand. And so you open this up, fill this with water, and squirt it through the filter. I really like that idea, and I bought some hose at the hardware store to for using it. That's way easier than trying to fill up a narrow neck bottle and then squeezing it through. The last thing on the list here is going to be knives, and I've got to go do something here. Dana, you guys take it over for a minute. I'll be right back.
I just wanted to say something. You know, we just got done talking about water. Dan and I had an experience, a couple experiences, when we went into the Badlands in North Dakota, into Medora in September. We knew we were going to have to pack water in. And I'm sharing this because water is essential, and try to have as many ways possible as to gather water as you can. Water was extremely heavy as we were packing it in, and we realized very quickly that we would not get very far if there was not some way of us collecting water. And so that got my mind thinking, and then we were up in Canada and we were backpacking, and there was plenty of water,
It was nasty.
but it was so nasty that you didn't want to drink it. It was so bad, and I was wondering if we would boil it, would it taste better? And actually, I found researching that it would actually taste worse. And so I guess I'm sharing this because water is one of the most essential items that we really need, and so
Having some type of water purification device
yes.
is very important.
And alternate ways of collecting it, because when we were in Medora, there was absolutely no water.
The life straw, Veronica, you're asking about the life straw. Those are nice, like if you want to hang it around your neck for backpacking, but if you need to fill a water bottle, that's challenging. You really, the one that Brother Jim showed, the little Sawyer Mini, I recommend those, and I really like the Sawyer Water Company because they're a not-for-profit organization. They exist, and they sell their products solely to be able to provide filtration devices for people in underprivileged countries. So,
Sorry about that. Just to add to what you just said, I've noticed a lot of ads on Facebook lately where they're advertising something that's essentially like the life straw. Um, yeah, the Sawyer price is comparable, and it's a much, I think more, I think it's a better system, and you have more options than just to suck something out of the puddle, so to speak. So
okay.
anyway, I would recommend. But again, like you see, I've modified my Sawyer a little bit, and anyway, that's worth doing. Um,
Somebody asked about the
we got to,
Sawyer. It's the Sawyer Mini. Wasn't that
yeah,
the Mini that you showed, the Sawyer Mini?
yeah. I have a couple different ones. I think the one I have is the Mini here that I had, yeah. But I have a couple other of the earlier models, and they're all good. Okay, let's talk about knives here just before we shut down. Um, oh, where'd it go? Oh, here. This Getting started, I would really recommend one of the Mora knives. If you got that companion, bring that out. This is something I bought, in the mid 90s, let's say. I have a picture of myself wearing this knife around my neck here in the mid 90s. This is a Mora. I think it's a 518 model. I like this better than their 5, whatever it is, the one they call the basic model. That's the cheapest one. This is a little bit more. The Mora that Dana has there, that's a companion. That one, it might even be a better choice than this, although I think this is just a little bit cheaper than the companion. The blade's almost the same, it's just the handle. Um, I have other knives that I like better that I've gotten since, but I used this one for a long time. You can just see the wear and tear on the sheath and stuff there. I made my own sheath for it. But I've had this knife for a long time. I like it really well. And, if this is the one I'm stuck with when I flee forever, I'm going to be fine with that because it's a good, no nonsense knife. You can get, either one of these two here for probably under 20 bucks, and you don't need to spend a whole bunch of money for a good knife. If you want to spend the money for a more expensive knife, fine. But be sure you know the features that you want. Um, I used to do survival programs and tell people to bring a knife, and the trouble is half the people would show up with a piece of junk that they spent a bunch of money for, and they thought just because they spent the money they were getting something good.
Mhm.
That is not the case. It wasn't, hasn't been for many years. And so, just start out with a Aura or something else that's comparable to that, and just learn what features a good knife has. Kaylin.
I was just going to say, now you can have a good knife and that's good, but what do you recommend for keeping it a good knife as far as the edge?
Oh, you want to talk about sharpening? Okay, I was going to save that for last, but
Okay, then leave it. Leave it.
no, that's fine. Well, yeah, no, yeah, let's save it. Okay, I do plan to talk about that. Yeah, you need to sharpen, learn how to sharpen, and I, I definitely want to talk about that. Um, in addition to a knife, okay, there's two other tools that you're going to need. And one is some kind of folding saw. I have a Baco here. You have to push the button there to open it up. Okay, somebody asked how much these things weigh. I didn't get the scales to check this out, but I know it's not a whole lot. The other one recently, I needed some for like teaching, to have some other ones so my students would have something, and ran across these. These were like, under $15, whatever. Like I think only about $12 a piece or something like that. It's Mossy Oak is the brand, and I really like these. I like it better than the Baco, and the Baco is like a industry standard kind of thing. Um,
I like it better than
what you
this
want to
too.
be, yeah, what
I
you
like,
want to be sure, like, yeah, right, the silky saw, the silky saw and the Bacos, those are the two, like industry standards in bushcraft. Anyway, you want a knife, I mean, a saw. If you look down it like this, you'll see every other tooth is kicked out a little bit. Okay, they call that set. And you want to make sure your saw has a good set. If it doesn't have any set, you're going to waste a lot of energy just pushing and pulling the blade through the slot. Whereas if the set is, if that's right, it'll cut through, it'll make a little wider cut than the blade, and you'll be able um, to cut through much easier. Now, you need a saw for a lot of things. Most importantly is talking about survival priorities here again, is cutting poles for a shelter. Okay, it's not practical to carry your shelter with you, but when you get to where you're is you can cut some young dead trees, they grow in thickets, and so you find some dead standing stuff in there and be able to cut trees down, cut them like this kind of big, or usually it's about like so. Some get some poles to make our shelter with. And so, and then also for trimming the branches off, for making a digging stick, for making different items. Uh, you need several, anyway, there's a lot of different things that you're going to need a saw for. Just to help you understand the importance of the saw is I used to carry a Swiss Army knife. Okay, this is the one I have now. And I, just started thinking, I want something a little more substantial. Like if this is all I get stuck in a situation and this is all I have, I want something more substantial. And so I went through several other knives, both folding and fixed bladed pocket knives. That's an interesting concept. But I went through several of those, and I kind of came back around, I really wanted a saw. And so I came back to the Swiss knife idea because it has the saw, right? Now, would I want a better knife? Yes, but the better knife doesn't have a saw with it. And so I'm willing to give up the better knife. I mean, the Swiss Army knife is adequate, um, but I have the saw, and I can do so much more with the saw than I could with just a blade. And so this is what I carry in my pocket all the time anymore. It's a farmer model, by the way. The camper model is what I used to carry. It's another type of Swiss Army knife. Now, in addition to the knife and the saw, you also want something that you can chop with. And I'm back and forth between two different options here. One is this is the cut down machete. Unfortunately, you can't just go and buy one of these. You have to get one and then cut it down. Now, I'm into metalworking, and so almost all of my blades, I've reprofiled them or redone them somehow. But you want something that's big enough that you can chop with. Oh, yeah, you got yours there. Something that you can chop with. And this is I think, like 14 ounces or something like that, including the sheath. The other thing that I like really well, this is Cold Steel Trailhawk. They make the blade different now. It doesn't curve out anymore, comes straight down. They have one curved out more than Norse Hawk. I think if I was going to get one now, I'd get that one and then reprofile it to down what I want. But this including the sheath is under £1. Okay. And the machete's a little lighter yet. So I've been a machete person most of my life. And so I really like the machete. I'm used to working with it. Just a quick note here, like this part of the back of the blade, round this off and then leave this nice square spine here so that you have something you can scrape with, like doing ferro rods and so on, or scraping, like smoothing stuff out. And then also this part here is rounded, so if you're using it like a draw knife, you're not hurting your hands on the square edge. Or if you're batoning, where you would be like hitting this, okay, with like your digging stick or something like that. I wouldn't use the axe handle. Anyway, just this isn't going to tear up your mallet so bad. So there's things I like this for better, and there's things I like this better for. And so in my thinking, I'm going back and forth which one I'm going to take when I go. Hopefully between everybody that, in the group, there'll be both of those represented. So you get both the best of both worlds that way. But that's where I'm at right now. But you want those three. Those are your three main tools, okay? Some kind of, good, strong knife, okay, the saw, and some kind of a chopping tool, a lightweight chopper. Now, if I had to tell you, go get these items, what I would say to get would be, get a Mora knife or the one like Dana has. That'd be fine too. Get the mossy oak saw, okay. And this is the Bushman by Cold Steel. This is all one piece. I This is balanced. Um, I have one of these and we played with it a bit. You can tell this one hasn't been used too much just because of this all metal. It's all one piece metal. So this thing's, goes all the way here. This is bomb proof. Um, get some kind of like that sports hockey tape or something like that to wrap the handle with because that's just smooth metal. And if your hand gets a little sweaty or slippery, that's not good. So you got a better grip. But this could be a good chopping tool, and this is something you can just buy and use the way it is. Um, or if you have metalworking options, then just go ahead and get it. I like the Tramontina. Here, there's a brand name. The Tramontina out of Brazil. I like their machetes. The older I get, the more organic I'm wanting to be, and so I like the wood handle on this really well rather than the machetes with plastic handles. Um, and then learn how to make your own sheaths. I haven't seen a good machete sheath that I liked since I was down in Mexico and some guy made it.
Somebody
Okay,
asked a question about neck knives, and that's kind of something that I would like to address if you don't mind.
go ahead.
I I have a number of different knives that can be used as a neck knife. The Mora Eldris is one. I don't. I It's too chubby for me for a neck knife.
Yeah, I played with that as a pocket knife for a while.
Yeah, it's a little chubby. Um, Swiss Tech is sold at Walmart. They have one called the Swiss Tech Licht, Leicht. You can take the pocket clip off of this and use this as a neck knife. I think these are
Uh-huh.
like $35, and it's a nice knife. It gives you a good bit of blade there. Um, you can get a good purchase on it, and so that's a pretty decent option. CRKT has one called the Minimalist. I have misplaced mine, and so I replaced mine with this. Was probably the most I've ever paid for a knife that I recall. It's a little heavier than I prefer, but I'm very comfortable fleeing to the wilderness with this hanging around my neck. It's like I showed this to Brother Jim, and he said, "You're never going to break that." Um, it's it's made by Victorinox. Do you remember what they call this? What is the name of this? I don't remember, but it's something Mike. It's the small Mike stands for micarta. It's got a micarta handle.
Yeah.
I wanted a neck knife that has the Scandi grind, which is the grind that you see here that's kind of a long slope, you can call it. The Mora knife also has the Scandi grind, and that's a lot easier for me as not an expert knife sharpener to keep sharp. And so I really like this knife. I don't like the fact that it's a little bit heavier than I prefer. I think it's 2.7 ounces. But it is a beast of a knife for a neck knife. It is so beefy. And so this is going to be around my neck when I go. This is going to be in my pack. I hope to have a Mora. I don't know. And probably I will have a pocket knife because one is none, two is one, and if you break it or lose it or somebody needs to borrow one, you know.
Somebody asked, what is a neck knife for? And a neck knife, you saw that had this lacing around this one when I showed it earlier. This is a lace like this. I can put it over my head. It's just a handy way to carry it. and very convenient. It's just right there.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people wear them on the belt. I don't like that. I'm always getting tangled up when I wear a knife on my belt, um, with it some way or other. And so for me, the neck knife works better. It's just a handy way to carry it. If the belt thing works for you, fine, go for it. But just to pick up where you left off there, I have my pocket knife. That's my backup blade. Okay, like this is going to be my main blade, or one of my other knives that I have set up basically the same way. But then pocket knife's my backup knife, and my backup saw is too, for that matter. But and then also, people say, well, you can't baton with something that small. Well, if I needed a larger knife, then I got my machete probably, and I can just use this for whatever bigger work needs to be done. Um, so this is something you've got to just play with, okay, and figure out what works for you, okay, and what your needs are. Um, be sure that you practice a lot of different things out in woods condition. Now, you can do that in your backyard. There's a thing called backyard survival. If you can't make it work in your backyard on a sunny afternoon, you're not going to be able to make it work up on the mountain in the dark when it's raining. And so when I go out, like let's say Sabbath afternoon hikes, as much as anything else, I'm gathering materials. I bring it home, and then during the week in the evenings or something like that, I'll sit around and do some crafting with stuff. Because I'm not going to take the time to do it out there because I'm hiking along or with a group or just whatever. But bring stuff home and start playing with it, and then you'll learn what you need all these different items for. Um, I'm just going to let it go at that because of the time. Let's talk about sharpening. This is my favorite kind of sharpener right now. This is called a Work Sharp sharpener. Anyway, it's Work Sharp is the brand. They've got several different types of sharpeners and stuff. Just look them up. They have a coarse one here, which I think is a 220 or 325 grit. And then this one is a 600 grit side. And then you
What
got the ceramic on top,
what did you say that
and a
material
little
is?
strop.
It's diamond. Is that the diamond
Pardon?
sharpener? Is that the diamond sharpener?
Yeah, what material is that, Jim?
It's diamond. Yeah, it's diamond plate. Yeah.
Okay.
No, not diamond plate. That's construction stuff. Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
diamond sharpener. Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is my Work Sharp. Now this is a bit heavy, just to be honest with you. This is a little heavier than I want to. This pretty much lives in my grab and go pack just because I can do almost anything I want to do with this. They have come out with another one, which is more reasonably priced. I think it's probably around $20 anymore, or 18 or 20, something like that. When I got them, they were down around 15. But this is the Work Sharp Pocket Knife Sharpener. Um, and this just has the one grit. Um, and then the ceramic. Okay, but this is real nice, lightweight. And you notice I made little bags to put all this stuff in. That's something else you need to do. Um, in addition to that, oh, this doesn't have it.
See, Jim,
Yeah,
how would you compare that to, because I've grown up in a whetstone. I got pretty handy with that. How would you compare that to the stone?
I've gotten real spoiled with the diamond blades.
Really?
I I like the aggressiveness, and so it's less time that I have to sit there. You know,
Mhm.
um, here's what I wanted to show you. This this is a stick. Something you make yourself. Uh, the paint stir sticks at the hardware store. Get one of those. Get an old piece of leather and glue that on one side and then get some stropping compound, okay? And then on the other side, get a piece of emery cloth. I think this is 900 grit emery cloth. And so if the blade just needs touched up, I can just, touch it up with this and then strop it out, and then I've got a razor sharp blade again. You're not going to be able to do serious, if you got some serious dings that you need to take out of the blade, just, you need something more like what this one here has to offer for that, or you just spend some more time with the diamond one. But this lets you, help between this and this. If you have a knife that's, just gotten a little bit dull, you can bring it back to razor sharp real easy. And the nice thing is these both fit right here. They're lightweight and they fit just in the little same bag. And so you got a whole sharpening system right here. I will even take this on a day hike with me. I probably won't need it myself, but maybe somebody else in the group will. For knife sharpening, I'll put the guy's name here in the chat. It's called Outdoors 55.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Yeah,
he's a pro.
He's a sharpening fiend.
He has one that I would consider introductory, even though it's not the first one that he made. That he's talking about, bringing a knife to razor sharp in 5 minutes or less or something like that. But he kind of outlines the principles of what's happening there. I really appreciate that guy. And I think the main thing I appreciate is he's taken videos, a close-up video of what the edge looks like, and what the different processes, what they do to the edge, which is almost microscopic. You can't see it really well, unless you really know what you're looking for. And, has dispelled a whole bunch of sharpening myths as a result of that, which I really appreciate. And so, just you do what needs to be done and you got a sharp knife. Here's all these other things that I've heard over the years that just makes it, mysterious and whatever. And I think, I don't know. Anyway, it's really a very simple process. Once you understand, and the way he explains it is the best I've heard. So if I was to teach you how to sharpen knives, I'd be telling you the same thing this guy is. He's not into pocket equipment. In other words, his sharpening stones are big blocks like this, which are probably way easier to work with. But I'm not going to pack something like that, And so I like the Work Sharp system and what they're making here with these more, pocket and pack size tools. One last thing I have here, you asked about tools. I just recently put this together. This is my like carving kit. And this rolls up and it's fairly lightweight. Okay. And I would be willing to carry this in my pack. And what I have here is I have one of these sharpener, these protect up the blade. I have a carving knife, and so this would be like another backup blade. And then this saw, I was just buying it as an experiment and really like the way this saw works for doing craft work. I'm not trying to just get through the stick I'm not trying to just get through the stick as quick as I can. This is like more finer, and so I can do more precise like craft work with it.
Really nice. Tell folks where you got that again. The little
this I got from Self-Reliance Outfitters.
Okay.
But there's other people that carry it too anymore, and it's not very expensive.
No, they're like 10.
And then the other thing I have in here is a gouge. Okay, which just enables me to make like spoons and cups or bowls and cooking utensils and stuff. So by carrying, this kit, I've got some more backup equipment, but I'm also able to make a much wider range of different things and more precise woodworking, carving projects. And it's a lot of fun.
You've spent a lot of my money, Brother Jim, teaching me this stuff. But it's good. It's all good. This, you had one bullet point on your conclusion slide there that where you said that this preparedness needs to become part of who we are, and that's why even as a woman, I wear my knives. I wear my neck knife. I wear my pocket knife. I carry a lighter in my pocket. I just, it's my ADC now.
Well, I keep going back to what Jesus said in Matthew 24:44. He says, be ready. You don't know when it's going to happen, so just be ready. That's a character thing. I mean, that's character development language. And then, with the other stuff I shared earlier, that lesson has just really hit me lately, that this needs to be who we are. This needs to be what we're known for.
Yes.
One of my students, she was known as the girl who carried the knife. Nobody else was carrying one, but she did. And I mean, this was like on trips and stuff, not at school. It wouldn't let you do it, but that's a good reputation to have, because
Yeah.
that knife enables you to do a lot of things and be a blessing to a lot of people that you wouldn't normally otherwise. It wasn't considered a weapon at all. And I don't know. Anyway, there's just a lot of weird thinking in our culture anymore. But
Yeah.
um,
One other thing that I would like
yeah,
to
we need to
mention.
start.
Yeah, we need to wrap it up. But one other thing I did want to mention about our grab and go bags, I believe that um, as the time gets closer and we recognize the signs of the times, we will recognize the need to keep our packs near us.
Yeah, that's one of the major lessons in Coakla's story. And so, I gave you the link there. Do read that story, okay? Um, the other piece that goes with that, I mentioned about the SAS, survival training. Since then, I've learned most special forces units around the world, doesn't matter which country they're hooked up with, but they are trained to keep their equipment pack at arm's length. Anything they take out, they use it. When they're done, they put it right back right away. So whenever anything happens, all they have to do is reach over, grab their pack, and they're good to go. And that for just reach over and grab it, you're good to go. The
Okay. You're breaking up.
So, that level of readiness is possible. And so, yeah, we need to be doing it.
Yeah.
Big question is that level of readiness consistent with faith? And if somebody believes that we're not supposed to be ready anyway, then of course that's not consistent with faith. But on the other hand, if we believe we should be putting together a pack and having it ready, then it is consistent with faith, and we need to just take it seriously and do it.
Yeah. Veronica asked a question, and we'll close with this. Of the three items, the cutting, chopping, and sawing tools, if you're financially limited, what should you get? And I would say the Mora. Just get a Mora.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be the
But I
cheapest item
mean,
anyway.
the mossy oak is only like, less than $20. So
Yeah,
I'd say for probably $40, you could have both of these.
yeah.
So,
Well, and the machete is less than 22, or just about
okay.
20, depending on where you get it. But then you have the trouble of getting it cut down. Well, and the Bushman, I think it's in that same ballpark too. So they say $60, you got all three of them. No, I understand. The reason I have all of this stuff is that I've been collecting it over the years. I've been very limited financially most of the time. And so for a long time, I didn't have everything I wanted, and I still don't. Um, but you just keep, it becomes a priority with you. And so you set aside money for it and so that you can do it.
Yep, that's what we've done. We didn't
Yeah.
afford all this overnight.
Well, the country living quote about, often hardship and privation, um, that that's part of God's plan that we live that way, so that we prioritize our spending, and recognize what the value of what we really need to have, and don't spend our stuff on our money on stuff that doesn't have value as far as, long term, or being able to help others, being an asset to our group.
Yep.
Well, we should close. It's been almost 3 hours here, so um, we need to let you go. So we I may show individually in videos some of these things we do already have. Like I have a couple videos on the PTS knife, and I can tell you where to get that. But I have some videos. Brother Jim has other videos, so we just cannot cover everything in one video. But if there's specific questions, you can reach out to us. Brother Jim's website is
Yes,
preparingtostand.org, and
but
ours is
don't email me to the website. Those emails disappear, and I know
yeah,
not where. So like
J.A.
email me,
Buller 7.
at gmail.com.
Yep, J.A. Buller 7 at gmail.com. Most of you know me from Facebook, so you can reach out to me on Facebook with more
Yeah,
questions
you
and
can
stuff.
reach out to me on Facebook also.
Okay, very good. All right, we better close here. Brother Jim, would you like to close us with prayer?
Sure.
Okay.
Father, thank you for this time we've been able to talk about what it means to be ready and how we can be a blessing to your people and group you connect with, and be ready for what you've told us is coming. Just continues to give us your wisdom, your Holy Spirit to continue teaching us how to make it happen for us and those that we're connected with, that you haven't left us alone. And just continue to be with us and bless us and work with us as we're all trying to get ready. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Brother Jim. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess until next time, which we may have a next time, we'll see. You never
Okay.
know. All right. Everybody
Okay.
take care. Thank you so much.